All right, well, thank you guys so much for joining. It looks like we have Michelle has joined us as well. So I'm just going to quickly just jot down the names of those who are able to join so I can follow up with anyone who couldn't make it. So for all of you on the line today, this is your first term teaching with SNHU. So I want to thank you so much for deciding to teach with us. We definitely have high expectations, but I think that the atmosphere that we try to build here in terms of supporting our students is what faculty love about it. So without those high expectations of our faculty, I don't think faculty would love working here as much. I've been working here for a little over 4 years now, about 4.5 years, and I still teach even though I'm a dean, and I love everything about the mission that we do here and supporting students. So you'll see that theme come up a lot in the things that we talk about. But I'm just going to go ahead and get into it. And like I said, you guys all have mic rights, so you can hook up your microphones. If that doesn't work, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll try to keep this as easy and casual as possible. All right. One thing I'm going to ask you guys is if you can see the screen advance, because sometimes with the PowerPoint, it's not synced up. So do you guys see the agenda on the screen right now? Awesome. Okay, so it's syncing. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction of myself and the general education team. So you're all teaching general education courses this term. We'll go over a bit about grading and feedback. That's going to feel like a lot, and I know that you haven't obviously started grading yet because we're only in week 1, but I'd rather introduce it to you now, and that way next week when you do start getting into the grading, you'll have it in your memory hopefully a little bit, and you can come back and watch this to refresh yourself, and go through any of the other documentation you have from Colt as well. We'll talk briefly about advisor communication. There's been some improvements in our LMS to help us reach out to advisors, so that's awesome. We'll talk about week 1 outreach, so that's very important obviously for this week, and we'll go over some of the faculty resources available to you guys. Excuse me, I'm just going to close my door. It's the first day of school here, and all my children are in elementary school, so it's only a half day. So it gets very loud in the afternoons. I have 4 children. And a dog who's with me, so if you hear her barking, that's her. All right, so this is the general education team. Anthony Siciliano is our executive director, so he oversees the entire curriculum and our associates in liberal arts as well. Priscilla Hobbs is another associate dean and director of faculty, and she focuses in terms of her work with faculty on our interdisciplinary studies courses, but she also provides curricular support to the entire general education program. Kim Salgado is another dean on our team. She is sort of the partner to me. She oversees the social sciences courses in general education and the humanities courses in general education. And I, Nicole Soto, that's me at the end there in the Bon Jovi shirt, I oversee the history courses in general education and the science courses. So all of you guys are either teaching History 100 or 200 this term, or Science 100 and 200 this term, and that's why you are here today with me. So mostly you'll be hearing from me. Every once in a while you might hear from Kim or Priscilla or Anthony based on mass communications we do to all general education faculty. We are going to be doing some trainings throughout the term as a team. Things like how to make really great announcements, how to give great feedback, stuff like that. That's very action-based within the course. So we'll be sending those invites coming up soon. But this is the group of folks that you'll be working with when you teach these general education courses. All right, I'm just gonna pause. I'm gonna kick my dog out because she's barking at all the commotion upstairs. Give me one. Okay. So moving on. So one thing I want to share with you all is our faculty promise. Now, hopefully they went over this in your training, but if for any reason they didn't, or if training was a really long time ago, I think this really helps encapsulate the work that we try to do here. So the first is be accurate, be right. this goes sort of for everything. I mean, these are kind of like life rules when I, think about them that way. But, when we communicate with students, especially, it's important that we do our best to be as accurate as possible. We don't want to be giving them misinformation because it's so easy, especially in an online environment, to confuse them when they're not face to face with you to ask questions, when they don't have a bunch of classmates surrounding them that they can get clarification from, or an office that they can pop into. It's really important that the information we give them is right, whether it's about an assignment or about a policy at SNHU. If you don't know the answer to something, you can always come to me. And if I don't know the answer to something, I will go find the correct answer. So that's really first and foremost, to make sure that our students have a good experience here, is that we're always giving them accurate information. Next is to take ownership of student issues and be a problem solver. So this really goes hand in hand with the other one. You're going to get a lot of questions from students. Things like, I don't understand this assignment, or I don't know what I'm doing. Or maybe they don't even really do that, but you just see that they're not submitting their work. So it's our job to really take that as our problem, not just the student's problem. So instead of saying something like, and I've seen this a lot from faculty, unfortunately, like, read the rubric. That's not really helping the student work through the problem. We want to make sure that they, whatever it is that they're in need of, that we get them through that finish line to understanding or to fixing the issue. Whether that's connecting them with the right resources, explaining a concept in more detail, finding a different way to explain it. Maybe it means getting on a phone call, maybe it means involving an advisor, but we really want to say that, when we find out that a student has an issue, or we suspect that a student has an issue, that we treat it as our own issue. And we really want to have that customer service mindset. Although I don't really love the analogy of students being customers, but in that sense, in terms of how we treat them, in terms of helping them overcome any obstacles they have, I think it's appropriate. So know your students and know your numbers. The know your numbers part, this, for your purposes in the classroom, this refers to, understanding the weight of assignments and the grades that a student has. So okay, I understand that the student is failing, or that they're missing an assignment that's worth a lot of points, or I understand that the student is on a military base and so sometimes has internet access issues, or I know that the student is going through a divorce and that has led her to sometimes be late with some assignments, or I know that this student is really interested in this topic, so I want to find a way to bring that into my feedback to them, or my discussion board replies to them, or something like that. There's a million ways that you can show this, but when you do show that you know your students and you know what's going on in your classroom, your students will feel your engagement. So demonstrate care for your student in every interaction. For me, this is actually the most important of all of them. If I could recruit faculty to SNU for one characteristic, it would probably be compassion. And you see that, when students discuss their good and bad experiences. When they have good experiences, it's usually because a faculty member was incredibly caring. Not because a faculty member was really smart or very accomplished, but because they really showed that they cared about what was going on with the student, usually when the student had some kind of a problem. So that's always in the forefront of my mind when I'm interacting with my students. And sometimes you know what the issue is, and sometimes you won't ever know. Not everybody's as forthcoming, but if you always approach your communications with them with kindness and care, then you're doing right by them. So never give up on a student who's putting in the effort to achieve his or her goals. So this is an important one, especially in our short terms, because you're going to see students who totally fall off the grid. And we definitely want to see faculty make efforts, and we're going to talk about week 1 outreach. But once you try and you're not getting any response from a student and they're just gone, that's going to happen. So that's not a student who's putting in the effort. So we do not expect you to chase down a student week after week after week after week when they've made no responses to your outreach and the advisor hasn't been able to get a hold of them. That's not the students we're talking about here. And you will, every term, get at least probably one student like that, maybe a couple. Unfortunately, it happens. But there will be those students who are kind of in and out. They start off okay, and then something happens, and then they're late, but they're replying to you over email, and then they submit something, and then they're late again. Those students are the ones that we're really focused on here. So if they're trying to keep it together, they're trying to keep that toe in the water of your classroom, we want to do everything we can to keep them in, and to give them some extra opportunities to stay engaged and to make it a successful term. Now, it won't always work out. There's not, we can't do everything, but we definitely want to be giving that effort. I have a lot of great success stories, of faculty really turning things around with students who thought that the term was going to be a total disaster. Last term, we had a student who asked to be removed from her class because she thought that the instructor was out to get her. And after a conversation with the instructor and with the student, we worked it out. And in the end, the student got an A and had one of the best experiences she's had it here at SNU in her class. So not only am I glad we didn't move her, but I'm glad that she saw that, she could work through it, and that the instructor also saw that, if you stick with it, generally it works out in the end. So that was nice to see. And if you're ever in a case like that where you don't know how to approach a student who's you feel like is sort of in the classroom, but they're not really as engaged as you want, you can always come to me with those kinds of questions, or to your team lead. And lastly, provide exceptional service every time. I think this is a bit of an umbrella of the other 5 listed here. So if you know your students, if you're always showing care for them, if you're not giving up on them, reaching out when you notice that they're missing work, helping them solve their problems, you're probably providing exceptional service every time. So that is our faculty promise, these 6 little items to live by. Any questions on that before I move on? All right, doesn't seem so, but feel free to keep typing away with any questions you might have. All right, so a couple of quick grading reminders, and this is going to apply to next week, but like I said, I like to remind the grading stuff is, because it's such a fast term, it's only 8 weeks, I like to make sure that everyone gets in good habits when it comes to grading. Zeros are due by Wednesday in Brightspace. So what do I mean by that? So this is the first week of class, and some students are going to miss some assignments that are due Sunday, this coming Sunday. So when you open your classroom on Monday morning, you're going to see a handful of missing assignments. Hi, Tamara. So you're going to see a handful of missing assignments when you go to the grades area in Brightspace. Now you need to put in a 0 for those assignments that are missing. The 0 doesn't get populated automatically once the due date has passed. Now those have to be in by Wednesday. I actually think it's better to put them in by Monday. And the reason for this is because we also need to outreach students. Like I said, we're going to talk about that in a bit more depth coming up. But when students miss assignments, we have to outreach them. So by email. I mean, you can call too, but email is nice because it gives a paper trail and all the stuff, and you can include the advisor. So you're going to be emailing them, and you want to email them as soon as possible, because you want to first of all let them know they've missed it. Sometimes they genuinely do not know that they missed an assignment. So the earlier you let them know, the quicker that they can take care of it and submit it. So doing that on Monday, for me, is a best practice. And for me, it's just the best way to start off the week and address those issues first things first, before I start grading, actually giving feedback on submitted work. So since I'm already sending out an email to them about their missing assignment, it makes sense that I would just put in the 0. And that way it can be sort of one communication. So I can email them, hi, Sam, this is, Nicole Soto, I'm your instructor for this course. I may notice that you missed this assignment. It was due yesterday. Great news, we have a late policy. You can totally still submit it. There's a 0 in the grade book for right now, but once you submit it, I'm going to grade it, and then that 0 will go away and you'll have your grade. And then you can copy paste that same language, or some shorter version of it, into the feedback when you put in the 0. That way, if they go to Brightspace before they go to their email, which is very common for students, they'll see the same note. So they'll see the 0, and they might think, what's going on? Maybe they didn't know they missed it. They don't know why they got a 0. And then they'll see your note. Oh, I didn't do this, whatever it was. But, my teacher's telling me that I have until, the end of this week to submit it per the late policy. Great. So either way, they'll get the message. So that two-pronged approach, definitely by Wednesday, but I think Monday is the best practice, is a really good habit to get into. So Sunday is when grades are due. I don't know why it says 11 p.m. It should say 11:59 p.m., but I think you guys all know that from your training. So assignments are typically due on Sundays. I don't think in our courses there are any exceptions to that of the actual grading, the deadline for when it's properly due. There's some suggested due dates, but the hard deadlines are always Sunday. And then your grading deadline is the following Sunday. If you're ever going to be late with grading, something happens, it's Sunday and you lose internet connection and you didn't finish, just, do your best to let us know. You can text me. My phone number is in my email signature is my mobile. So you can text me if something like that happens, you don't have internet connection. But generally speaking, try to spread out the grading throughout the week and then it's usually not a problem. And then the only other thing that you'll need to check for is late assignments. So students will submit work late. And unfortunately, right now in our learning management system, there's no notification. So you'll just have to sort of scan the grade center for late work. That's really the only way to do it. So I generally just make a habit of it a couple times a week, usually on Mondays, because I'm checking the grade book anyway to see who missed anything. So that's one day that I do it. And then usually I just do it another time throughout the week just to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Sometimes students will email you to tell you that they've submitted something late, but they often don't, and they're not required to. I see Megan's typing. So she asks, do we have a question? Do we have to wait until after the Sunday due date to start grading? Megan, that's a good question. No, you don't have to. The only time I would caution against it for some discussion boards because it's open the whole week and a student might add something that you want to consider. But generally for like a paper or like a short essay, those kinds of things where they just submit it and there's no real interaction, you're fine to grade it ahead of time. The only risk, and it's a very, very low risk, I mean, it almost never happens, but just to keep in mind, is that the student might say, oh, well, I meant to fix it, I made a mistake, but I didn't want that one to be graded. I mean, if they submit it, you can grade it. So you don't have to take a second submission if a student tries to say that after they've submitted and then you grade it. Maybe they didn't like their grade and they're trying to say that wasn't what they really meant to submit. But that's a very low risk thing. So if you find yourself with time and you want to get a head start on grading, I would definitely start with those things. Or you can start with, the only other thing to watch out for is quizzes. So a lot of our courses have quizzes. I'm not sure which course you're teaching, but the quizzes have 2 attempts. Those should be automatically graded though, and it really depends on the course. So, but if there's a course where you have to grade the quiz and there's more than 1 attempt, you might want to just wait for it to finish out. But generally speaking, yes, you can grade ahead of time. All right. So, and once you start grading, you're obviously going to be giving feedback. So you practice this a lot in your training, I'm going to assume. I haven't seen the training within Brightspace, although I have taught the new adjunct instructor training, but that was back when we were in Blackboard, so I don't know how much it's changed since then. But I know that we focus a lot on feedback. So your feedback is going to be in the rubric for when there's a rubric. I'll get to I see your note. 1 second, Michelle. So your feedback is going to be in the rubric, and you want your feedback to, even if the student did do a great job, you can still be positive about it. Be specific. That really is helpful when you're specific about, okay, this is the work I see that you've done, and this is what I'm seeing you're doing versus what my expectations were. Give actionable suggestions. So actionable suggestions, this can apply to even when a student does a phenomenal job. So sometimes students do a great job, but they're not necessarily sure how to recreate that greatness. So you can say, this is what you did that was so great. Make sure that you do this in future assignments, or it was really great to see you do this. This is going to help you in this future assignment. So they can make that connection. And find ways to share your knowledge and resources in the feedback. A lot of the times it's very instructional, the feedback that we see from faculty. but doesn't share a lot of your expertise about the broader subject. So, and this is something you'll get used to. I don't necessarily expect this in the first term, but do look for ways to include, like I said, additional knowledge and resources, and really think of it as a teaching moment. All right, so let me quickly pause on the feedback bit and address Michelle's question. So Michelle asks, I have a student asking me what the correct answers are or what she got wrong on her first attempt. And no worry about the typos. I am the queen of typos. So it sounds like you're referring to a quiz, Michelle. So if it's a quiz where they get like a multiple choice type of quiz, where they get a second attempt, obviously we wouldn't give them the answers. So they should review the reading and then try it again. And I believe the way it's set up, if it's got 2 attempts, is that after the second attempt, the student should be able to see what the correct answers were. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question. Yeah, so a lot of times, and I get the frustration on the student's part because, they're like, well, I don't know which one I got wrong. It's like, but if I tell you which one you got wrong, then, it's very easy to just go back and, just focus on that one. But really, we want them to go back and read through everything and internalize it better so that when they try to answer the question again, they get it right. But yeah, I see the student's perspective on that one too, but unfortunately we can't just, give out the answers. So in terms of don'ts when it comes to feedback, we don't want to use the same feedback for everyone. Now, the way that it's set up in Brightspace is usually our feedback is going to be in 2 different places, but really the bulk of the feedback should be in the rubric when there's an attached rubric. So in the part that's not the rubric, that's just sort of like the general feedback area, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. That might be the same to everyone except for their name. So, hi Sam, thank you for your submission. Please see your rubric for detailed feedback. That part can be the same to everyone because that's not really the feedback, right? That's just directing them where to find it. Hey, go to the rubric. We really do want them to be doing that. We do want the bulk of your detailed, actionable feedback to be in the rubric. But that bit, the detailed, specific bit, is obviously going to be different for everyone. But the more generic part that's just directing them where to go, for instance, could be the same for everyone. There's also a few other instances where you could give similar feedback to everyone, as long as certain aspects of it are personalized. But if it's the same across the board and I check out your class and I see the feedback on a discussion board is literally the same for every single student, then we'll have a conversation about how we can personalize it. Don't only focus on the negative. So like from the do's, stay positive. If you're just talking about the things the student did wrong, they're definitely going to get discouraged and they won't be able to repeat the things that they did do well. Usually there's at least something that they did do well. Even if it's just submitting the work on time or submitting it at all, you can find something to be positive about and still get the point across about the things they need to improve on. And don't forget to use their name and your name. I think that just really adds a personal level to it. And the reason that I suggest faculty add your name is because a lot of times students don't know your name. And it's not easy to find out your name in Brightspace. It's the new problem we have. So this is one way that we can remind our students of who we are and how we want them to call us. So some people like to be called Mr. or Mrs., Professor, whatever. Some people go by their first name in the classroom. It's entirely up to you, but that way they know how to refer to you as well. So if you sign off on everything that you do, your announcements, your feedback, and your discussion posts with how you want students to refer to you, that shows them how they should do things as well, like when they write you an email, but then also how to address you. I see Tamara's typing. So yeah, in Brightspace, I know that we have those announcements with all of our information, but that's kind of gets buried at the bottom pretty quickly, and so a lot of students don't find it. And yeah, it's actually quite difficult students have found to figure out who their instructor is if they don't go digging for it. So I try to put my name out there in any sort of communication I have with students. All right, let's move right along. So looking at the time, I'm going to try to do a quick demo in Brightspace, but I don't want to take too much time since you guys won't be grading yet this week. So Tamara asks, do you have suggestions as per our responses in the first getting started discussion? That's a great question, Tamara. So it's more of an icebreaker. I try to not make it too short. I try to connect with the student on some level. I always welcome them to the class. Maybe depending on what they shared, I might ask a question that tries to open them up a little bit. Some students write something very short, so there's not a lot to go on, so you want to maybe encourage them to share a little bit more. But it really depends on what they share. You do have to respond to everybody in the first week's discussion. So that's, like Tamara says, it's apart from the grading. So hopefully all 28 or however many students you have in your class post before the end of the week. We need to reply to everybody who posts. Now, some students are going to post late Sunday night, so that just means we've got to reply to them on Monday. But this is the only discussion board where you're required to reply to everybody. But generally, I just like to see something more than just welcome to class. Some sort of engagement with them, a little bit reflecting on something they said. Whether, if they said even if they said they had a dog, you can say, oh, I have a dog too. It can be something personal, or it can be something about the course. Every course has a slightly different getting started discussion. So it depends on the topic. So that's why I can't maybe be as specific as I'd like. In the course that I'm teaching this term, we're teaching them about Microsoft Office. So they talk about their experience with Microsoft Word. So in that class, depending on what they discuss, I might share an example of how I use Microsoft Word. I might share a link to something that has to do with something they said. I might just, thank them for sharing and ask them for some additional tips. So I can get into the content, or I can just, keep it like a welcome, get to know you kind of post. All right. I'm going to try to do a demo quickly. I don't want to spend too much time because we can get really into the weeds, and like I said, you guys won't be grading until, well, unless you get a head start, but you probably won't start grading until Monday. So let me pop into my class real quick. I'm going to share my screen. And you tell me when you can see my, when you can see a class list. Great, okay. So when you are ready to grade, let's say it's Monday, you're going to go to course menu and you're going to go to grades. And you're going to see your class, and then you're going to see your assignments up here at the top. Oh, and my boss is pinging me. I'll have to ignore him. So discussions are graded a little bit differently than assignments, like projects, or this is a journal example in my class, or short essays. They both have rubrics, but the way that you access the rubric is going to look really different. So I'm just going to quickly show you the difference. And then the third type of activity is like the quizzes that Michelle mentioned, which are generally auto-graded. So this is an example of an auto-graded assignment where there's no rubric attached, and you would just put in the number. So we're just going to focus for right now on the ones with rubrics. So let's say I'm ready to grade all the discussions. So I would come up here and I'd click Grade All. And then I'm going to scroll down, and my students are in alphabetical order. So that's how I'm going to grade them. If there's a submission, you'll see this little box here. If there's not, it'll be empty, and you would put in a 0, and then you could put the feedback here. So this is where you would put the feedback that says, hey, I noticed you missed your assignment. Discussion boards cannot be submitted late. So for this one, you might say, hey, I'm sorry you missed the first discussion. Our next discussion is whatever the next discussion is. It might not be the next week. It might not be until week 3. But you might mention that, hey, don't forget to join our week 3 discussion when that comes, next week, or whenever that happens to be. But you want it to be encouraging. They're going to see a 0, so your comment there should say something that keeps them moving forward. And then you would click save. But for someone who did submit the assignment, the discussion boards has 3 areas. So this is where you read the submission. So you can read what they posted here. So this is her initial post and then the 2 reply posts. And then you can just exit out once you're done reading it. And then here is where you can put in, like I said, that more general feedback if you're going to sort of give it the same. So I could write something like, Leandra, thanks for your DB participation. Please see rubric for detailed feedback. And maybe that's all you write, and I'm going to click save. I'm going to cancel that later. And then here is where you actually fill in the rubric. So it's under assessment. So we do have to fill out the rubrics in order to get the score, and then we can also add feedback here. So let's say I want to give her a perfect score on comprehension. Now, you'll read the description and you'll decide where the student lands. These are gateway courses, so if you're ever on the fence, usually you would probably be more lenient than more harsh because these are introductory students, and especially at the beginning of the term, you can give feedback that can push them towards higher performing work or to better work. But if you're ever in doubt, just keep that in mind, that these are students who are generally brand new or fairly new to the school. And then to add feedback for discussion board rubrics, you click the feedback button there. You add whatever you want to say that goes along with this particular critical element. You do the same for the rest of the critical elements. So we've got timeliness one. You don't necessarily have to give a comment on every single critical element all the time. But if you're ever going to take away points, you should definitely give feedback. And then on the bigger items, like this discussion board, this is the biggest element. Even if they get a perfect score, I want to give them feedback because that's really the bulk of it, of their work. So I would just go through and I'd select what I want, give some feedback here. Your rubric's going to look a bit different. The rubrics in the gen ed classes for discussion boards have different elements, but the look is the same, just the elements are different. So you'll add your feedback. And then when you're done, you'd click save at the bottom, and it's escaping me because my screen is too big. Oy, oy, oy. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I shouldn't use Firefox. And then the save and record button. Yeah, it doesn't. I think most people like Chrome better for Brightspace, but I'm stuck in Firefox for my own weird personal reasons. So then you'd click save and record. I'm going to have to X this out because Leandra's going to think I'm crazy for grading hers already. Oops, I think I missed one. If you missed an element, I'm glad I showed you that. If you missed an element, it won't record. So I missed the writing mechanics, so it didn't record her score. So now I'm going to fix it, hit save and record, and now I'll see that it populated the 40 points. So you're just going to go through and do that for each student. So you'll give some feedback here to let them know what to do. It doesn't have to be as brief as what I put up here, but it can be. And then the detailed feedback will go in the rubric. Any questions on that? So those are sort of the 3 areas. You read what they wrote, you give a little note here, or at least a little note here in the pencil. I like to call this the pencil area. And then you give the detailed feedback and the score in the rubric. I don't see anyone typing, so I'm going to assume that means everyone's thumbs up on this. Yeah? Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to a non-discussion assignment that has a rubric. I hit cancel, but you would hit save and close when you're done. Okay, so we will take a look at a different type of assignment. So in my case, this class has a journal. Your course, it's going to be things like essays, milestones, projects, things like that. So you'll do the same thing. You'll do the drop down, grade all. This is one way to access it. With these kind of assignments, not discussion boards, there's two ways. You can get it here and just do the same thing that we did, except it's slightly more straightforward. You can click, the submission will be here. And when you click it, this is actually going to open up a whole new window. And you'll have access to the rubric from here. So you can download the student report, or you can read it right in the screen. I tend to like to download it because it's easier to read. But you can download it and it will pop up and you grab it wherever it goes in your computer. And then this little grid icon is where the rubric is. And then the pencil area that we sort of talked about before is going to be this feedback area. So this is like before, I might write, Leandra, thank you for your journal submission. Please see rubric for feedback. Now you can give more feedback here. You can give something that's a little bit more overarching. It depends on the assignment. This is a very small assignment, so I'm not going to spend like 20 minutes giving her feedback. But for a bigger assignment, you might want to give sort of an umbrella impression of her work, and then go into the detailed feedback in the rubric. So then if we pop back up here, we'll get the whole thing. And then we can see what this rubric looks like. So this is going to have its own critical elements. This looks a little bit different than the one for the discussion board you'll see. So you'll still pick a proficiency level, but then over here is where you write the feedback. So you'll click here, and then this is where you'll write the detailed feedback for that particular element. You'll say what they did well, what they could improve on, what you wish you had seen, what you were happy to see, stuff like that. And then you would click save. I didn't write anything. And then you'll do that for each critical element, and then click save and record. And I didn't complete the whole thing, so you'll notice no number populated here. But when you select every single critical element, some score for each line, this will populate. And then any feedback you put in the rubric will come underneath this note that you put here. And then you'll click publish. So I'm going to click publish. There's not going to be a grade, but that's okay. The student won't be able to see anything until I give a grade. And then you're done with that student. And then from here, you can just go to next student. So you don't have to go back to the grade center once you're in here. All right. How do you deduct points for lateness? Great question. So after let me go, no, I'm still on the student. So let's say that the student had a 30. I gave her a perfect score and it gave a 30. Automatically populated from the rubric with a 30. But I'm like, okay, she was late. I'm going to take off the 10%. What's 10% of 30? 10% of 30 is 3. I'm going to take off 3 points. All you simply do is you click in here and you type in what the new grade should be. So in this case, it would be 27. And then you'd click update. Or if you did it before you published it, it would just be when you hit publish. So those are the basics of how we get into the grades area and where we put the feedback. So in both cases, you're going to be putting some amount of text in 2 different places. And always using the student's name. I know in this case, I didn't sign off with my name, but generally when I finish something out, I would do that. Any other questions while we're here in Brightspace? So I'm just going to close this out. Actually, I'm going to stop presenting my screen. And we'll pop back into the PowerPoint. Okay. Excuse me. Okay. Any other questions about grading in general? Excuse me, before we move on. Okay, awesome. So another thing that you're going to be doing a lot, especially in the first couple weeks of class, is communicating with student advisors. So in the first couple weeks, when students are having issues, they're late with work, maybe you notice plagiarism, really anything out of the ordinary, or that you think might be a red flag in the first couple weeks, always CC the advisor. If a student in week 5, all of a sudden is late with an assignment, but they've been great up until that point, you don't necessarily have to CC the advisor. But in the first couple weeks, we know that things can be very tenuous for students, and so we want to be on top of it. And advisors are, our partners in making sure that students get off to a good start. So when you include an advisor in an email, and I'll show you how to do that in Brightspace as well, make sure that you make it clear why they're being CC'd, and let the student know. So you're writing to the student, hey, I noticed you were late with your assignment. You talk to them about it. And then you say, I've included your advisor here so they can help keep you on track, or whatever you want to say. That way the advisor knows that they're just there sort of as an FYI and as a second set of support for the student. Now, sometimes things escalate. Students aren't replying to you, and you're not sure what to do. That's when you might want to reach out to an advisor one-on-one. So you email a student about a late assignment, you don't hear back, they still haven't turned it in, and 2 weeks have gone by, and you say, okay, I'm going to email the advisor. Email the advisor, hey, I haven't heard back from so-and-so. Have you heard from them at all? Because if the advisor is having communication with the students, or if they're not able to get in touch with the student, they might not necessarily alert you about that. But if you ask them, they're more than happy to work with you and share with you what they know to the extent that they can. And a lot of times what you'll find is that they've had trouble getting in touch with the student as well. But at least then, you've covered your bases, and you've alerted the advisor to the fact that the student hasn't been responsive to you either. Don't forget to include the student's full name. This is actually not as important anymore. So when we CC advisors through Brightspace, they will see the student's full email address. So we actually don't need to do that anymore. So I apologize for that. This is a new feature that we just got in Brightspace, so we don't have to do that anymore. And you don't, like I said, you don't have to CC for every late submission all term. So let's see how to do the actual thing in Brightspace. So this new feature that we just got a couple weeks ago is when you go to Brightspace, you go to Tools, and you click your class list. So let's say you want to email the first student. This is just a test class, so you'll see it looks a bit weird. There's a little drop down next to their name, and it says View Auditors. So the auditor is their advisor. I don't know why they decided to call it that, but you'll click on that, and then this third screen will pop up, and you'll see a choice down here at the bottom that says Email, CBE, that's the student's name in this case, and Auditors. So when you click on that, it will open up an email screen within Brightspace where you're emailing the student and the advisor is CC'd, and then you can put in your note. And you can also choose to have it have yourself get a copy in your own email box. So the nice thing about this is, compared to how it used to be that both people got a blind copy back when we had Blackboard. So the advisor would get a copy of the email, but because the student was also blind copied, instead of getting it properly, they couldn't see the student's email address. So they, might say, John. Well, okay, I've got 10 Johns in my advisor list, so how do I know which student it is? Now they see the full student email address, so it makes it a lot easier. So that's how we do that. All right, so week 1 outreach. So this is what you're going to be spending some time doing, especially the second half of this week, in addition to replying to everybody in the discussion board. So contact students who haven't yet participated with a little helpful nudge. We encourage students to do their first week discussion in our general education classes by today, Wednesday. But we had a holiday Monday, and and I realized, I forgot to update this holiday. Last term it was July 4th. This term it's Labor Day. But we want to encourage them to get that done early, so it doesn't slip through the cracks. There is a risk that if they don't do any work in week 1, they could be removed from the class automatically. That's not something that you specifically have to worry about, but we do want to be encouraging them to do something in the classroom so that that doesn't happen to them. Students, when it comes to the non-participation in week one, advising is also going to be working with them. So just keep that in mind, that they might be hearing from some other folks as well in terms of participating that first week. We know that early engagement is definitely a precursor to success in the classroom. So anything you can do to encourage students to be active is really helpful. Especially if you see that a student hasn't even like logged in. Maybe they forgot the term started this week. You can see if they've logged in when you go to class list and you scroll all the way over to the right. It says their last login date. Those students are really at risk of not participating in the first week and being administratively withdrawn from the class. So maybe check that out on Friday and send an email out to any of those students as well. And then again, we had a holiday Monday, so that's gonna have a slight negative impact just on everybody getting back into the swing of things. And I know that in my neck of the woods, this was the first week of school, so you could have some students who are parents and are dealing with that as well. So just some things to keep in mind. All right, and lastly, you have a lot of help at your disposal. The first I want to tell you about is the help desk. I think you should add it to your mobile phone right now if you've got it in front of you. If anything, if you notice something wonky in the classroom, it's not working the way that it should, call them. They are really great about resolving things, and if they can't resolve something, they'll let you know. If you get on the phone with them, and they generally answer pretty quick. I'm not on hold for long usually. If they can't resolve your issue, it's probably something that they simply can't resolve, and it has to be resolved by another team. If that happens to you, please let me know, because it might be something wrong with the entire course and affecting all the sections of that course, not just your section. But sometimes it's just something weird with like your computer or your connection, and they can resolve it for you. But they're such a great help. So they're on my speed dial. It's a wonderful thing. COLT is probably a name that you're pretty familiar with. You've probably gotten a lot of emails from them. That stands for the Center of Online Learning and Teaching. They have a wonderful website that we have a link to here. So I'm going to send this out to you guys as a PDF so you can access these links. But they've got tons of tutorials, PDFs, and videos for how to do things in Brightspace. We covered just the tip of the iceberg today. So having access to that site is such a godsend, especially for your first term. And you can, if you ever have questions about something that you're not sure who to address to, I mean, you can always take them to me, but you can also email faculty support at snhu.edu, and they're a wonderful resource as well that goes to that whole team. The ServiceNow portal is similar to the help desk, where if you notice that like there's an actual broken link in your course and you're pretty sure it's not your computer, but there's just something wrong with the way the course was built, you would submit it there. And we've got the link here. So when I send this out, you'll have a link to it. In that same ServiceNow portal is also the registrar. So this will be more of an end of the term situation, but if you ever needed to do an incomplete grade for a student or submit a grade change for a student, you would do it through the ServiceNow portal. If you have anything HR related, a lot of that stuff happens through the service portal. And if you have a course improvement idea, like this is a terrible discussion topic, I really think it should be changed. I mean, you can take those to me first and we can talk about it, but you can also submit those sorts of bits of feedback through the ServiceNow portal as well under course related requests. So that's another thing that's really helpful to bookmark once you get this link, just like the COLT site. And then your dean and your team lead are sort of your actual, the human being contacts that you're going to hear from the most. This being your first term, you're going to have a team lead who's evaluating you and your course every week. They're going to be sending you weekly emails about, things to keep in mind, tips and tricks, ways to be more efficient, all that great stuff. They are there as a coach. Most of them have been teaching here for many years, a lot of them longer than me even. And they're wonderful resources. And their main goal is just to help you be as successful as you can be in your first term. You'll also have a team lead your second term. And then fingers crossed, everything goes well. You're doing a fantastic job, which I expect will happen. you'll still have a team lead, but you won't be evaluated after your second term. But you'll always have a team lead. And then as your dean, you always have a dean. I am the dean for the general education courses. You might teach other courses in the future outside of the general education curriculum, and then you might have a different dean. But for History 100 and 200, Science 100 and 200, I am the dean, so you can come to me with literally anything. A concern about the course, you don't know how to handle something that's going on with a student, you have a question about some SNHU policies, like how to handle plagiarism, or the late policy when things seem a bit gray area. Always come to those with me. If you have a request about scheduling, you want to take a term off, or you want to teach more, or you want to teach a different class, those are the kinds of things you can always bring to me. All right, and that is really all that I have for you guys. So like I said, I know it's a lot, and I've done a lot of talking, and you guys have been wonderful listeners. But what questions do you have at this point? I know we've got 3 days, 2.5 days under our belts of the term. Has anything come up that was concerning or confusing, or you weren't sure how to handle, or anything you'd like clarity on? Yeah, I don't, if there are no questions, and you guys have already asked a lot of questions, so that's been great. That's totally fine. I think that we've covered all the stuff that's super important for this week and for the start of next week. So the week 1 expectations, and a foundation for getting started on grading. So hopefully that's good. Sure, Tamara, shoot. Oh, and also when I email you guys out this document, just so you have a copy of it and you have those links, I'm also going to send you a document we put together called Great Expectations. It's the general education team put it together. It's basically our interpretation of the fundamental faculty requirements and the instructional practices rubric. So those are the basic expectations for your work in the classroom. So how we see that in action in the classroom and what we expect of you. So I'm going to include that as well. So Tamara asked, how many new faculty do you have this term? I think it's 13. Last term I had 19, so this is a smaller group, a lighter load in that respect. You're more than welcome. But yes, we're a very growing team because all students have to come through the general education curriculum. And so as SNU grows, so does general education. So we are always hiring more instructors. So if anybody who's interested in teaching for us, let them know that they ought to apply, and maybe they're a good fit for the general education courses. All right. Well, thank you all so much. You're going to give you back 5 minutes of your afternoon. And if you ever have any questions, you all have my email address. You'll be getting an email from me shortly with this recording. The recording, it takes a few hours to get ready, so that'll come later today. And a copy of the PDF and that other document that I discussed called Great Expectations. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure we'll be in communication throughout the term.